Hello, and a big warm, wide welcome to this week's edition of the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, I'm sitting here on what feels like, honestly, the hottest day of the year. In England, it is melting, and I'll tell you what, us Brits, we do like to moan about the weather, so I'm not even going to go there, but it is a bit hot today. I tell you what, the last week for me has been pretty full on. I've been here, there, and everywhere. I've just been getting over the tail end of an absolutely horrid cough, which I then ended up thinking my throat chakra was blocked. Probably was. So then I did lots of healing on myself for that. And honestly, it just feels like the last couple of weeks have flown by. There's been so much in my newsfeed as well about the Arthur Findlay College. And do you know what? It's taken up so much of my newsfeed. I can't believe it on social media. I was thinking to myself, do I even talk about this on this show? Do I even want to get involved? But do you know what? I'll tell you what. I've been to the college a couple of times. I've had a great time there, both times. And you know, I think with everything, there's always going to be people who are happy and unhappy with the way something is ran. A few things that I've learned in life is a lot of people don't like change. Change can be frightening. It can be different, but we do have to change. I read into that as you will, but, you know, it's a lot of the comments I've seen, though, have been, you know, filled with a lot of hate and a lot of, you know, people just making up their minds based on social media. And whilst I do think social media has a place, I definitely do, for people to speak. You know, I think my sort of view on things is I'm just going to take a balanced opinion and feel and think as I see and feel myself. And, you know, I've never had anything but experience there. It's such a beautiful place. And, you know, I owe a lot to the catalyst of my journey to going there. As you know, I've been to the college. It was a pivotal moment when I first went there. So that's all I'm going to say on the matter, quite frankly. We actually have some beautiful episodes coming up in the coming weeks from some shooters there, and honestly, some really interesting stories. I spoke to one guest yesterday, a lovely individual who has such a lovely way of talking about her mediumship development, honestly. And there was so much common threads between us. It was really beautiful. So in the episode today, we're going to be talking to Winter Brook. Now, Winter is a lawyer turned medium. She's also a tutor and a humanitarian. She really has a journey from law to light. And Winter's story begins with very early encounters of the spirit world, where she initially saw, as a lot of people do, them as imaginary friends. And as she closed the chapter of being a child, she really discovered her gifts later in life. And she had a very successful career in law and a deep commitment to humanitarian causes. So it's a quite captivating episode. I really enjoyed the conversation with Winter. She made so many really valid points, and I thought she was a beautiful storyteller. So I think you're really going to enjoy the episode today. Do remember, I love hearing what you think about these episodes and these conversations and what you think about some of the things that the guests have said. And the best way to engage with the show really is to go over to YouTube, where you can actually watch. If you listen, it's fine. This is an audio experience. This is a podcast. I love have you listening to the podcast, but you can watch the full interviews over on YouTube. A lot of the interviews are recorded via Zoom because of the international nature of the guests, literally bringing you people from all over the globe. But I pretty much do read every comment, and you know, it always does make me smile reading some of them. So without further ado, let me introduce to you my conversation with Winter Brook. So, Winter, firstly, a massive warm welcome onto the Soul Sync podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a delight to have you with us. So, the introduction, quite the story. When I was looking through the show notes over the days that have preceded, the days that have just gone past, your story is really interesting, and I think we're going to have a great conversation. So, take us, first of all, back in time to your childhood, because I believe you had quite some encounters back then.
Yes, I was wide awake to spirit, very much aware. I think most children are. And I was the textbook case. I had regular daily interaction with what I suppose are spirit guides. I had a friend, Dodo, and my mother used to have, we used to have conversations. I'd ask if Dodo could sleep over. He was my friend, right? You know, I was like 4 or 5. And she'd be like, well, I'd have to ask his mom. And then we'd have this whole conversation, and I'd be translating what the mother was saying. And I was thinking, why doesn't my mother just hear them? My parents, of course, thought it was just an imaginary friend. And as a fast forward, I did shut down when I started first or second grade. I don't know when exactly. And that's generally when most children kind of shut down, when the development of the other side of the brain starts with the mathematics, et cetera, that you learn in school. And also it becomes, at least back when I was little, uncool to have an imaginary friend. So I just kind of forgot about it. I'm very good at forgetting things, which has
me
pros
too.
and cons.
Me too. It does indeed. Yes, my memory is terrible. But yes, carry on.
So yeah. So and then I was just not exposed to anything metaphysical growing up. I was raised Presbyterian, and my dad used to have a couple beers and say he speaks to God and God speaks back, but I thought that was the beer talking. So we didn't pay him much mind. And I suspect he was speaking to spirit, but it didn't get explained that way to me. And outside of a few extraordinary experiences, I just kind of grew up. I became an attorney like my dad, which you call solicitor.
Solicitor, yes. We had an interesting conversation, but we both actually in the same industry. I deal with solicitors every single day and been in that industry. And you're a solicitor, Winter. So we were talking about the differences in terminology before we got started, which was probably fascinating to us, but not maybe so much to other people. But yes, we can relate.
Yeah. So, and I did the short marriage thing, had a child. Then as a single mom, I adopted my youngest child. I got very involved with the Rotary Club, which I believe you have Rotary clubs over in the UK. I'm very focused into humanitarian tasks and work, volunteer work. And sometime around 2005, my abilities began to reopen. And I knew nothing about the metaphysical world. I didn't know what a medium was, and my understanding of a psychic was the woman with the crystal ball at the carnival.
That was mine.
I had no exposure to any of it.
And I suppose, when we talk about you having these experiences when you were 6, I can't even remember what that, time looked like. So I can imagine it was quite, it wasn't like you could pass reference that time. So it must have been, quite profound at the time for you.
Well, what I was doing was interacting with spirit beings, but to me, they were the same as my parents. I didn't know, I didn't understand that they were no longer incarnate.
Yes. Yes. That makes sense.
When I opened up on that journey, I did become acquainted with what some people would term as a joy guide. I have a little boy about 8 years old, and his name is Charlie. And that was probably my little friend when I was a little girl. And
it was probably what? Sorry,
my little friend Dodo when I was little.
Oh,
it was. I would assume it was Charlie, who's I call him a joy guide.
So it's a little boy who's probably been with you since your childhood, but only came back again, or was there the whole time, perhaps?
I would assume no. He was there the whole time. I was just unaware of it.
Yes.
So, but other people have seen him. I do a lot of. I used to pre-COVID. It's starting to, get a little bit more busy again. I demonstrate at public libraries on Long Island. I've been to almost 60. And so when I get psychic seeing audience members or clairvoyants, they have told me my aura goes like this and it sticks out a little. There's a little person next to me. So I know that's Charlie.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, he's right on stage with me when I'm working.
So your relationship with him is you obviously communicate with him and have conversations.
Yes. And
Oh, okay.
he's accompanied me. I've been to the UK a few times
Uh-huh.
in studying, and I went over to Banyan to a couple of seances. There was a Christmas seance, a Christmas tree seance, where they, in case anyone's unfamiliar with that term, everybody brings a unwrapped gift, which is then wrapped. They have to make sure there's no batteries in the toy.
Uh-huh.
And then during the seance, which is dark, the spirit children come in and they unwrap the toys. And then apparently a duplicate toy is made for them in the world of spirit. And the actual physical toys are donated to a children's charity. In this case, it was a children's hospice. And Charlie was with me. And then they raffled off a couple of stuffed animals. And he's like, I want the blue one. I want the blue one. So I, put the highest bid to get the little blue toy. And that's in my seance room now because they also sit in a cabinet for physical development.
You've just
So,
said so
yeah.
many interesting things in a really short amount of time. I feel like I want to rewind to go back a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, no. There's so much. It's interesting. I've got lots of questions. So when you were going through your life up until what age was it that this reactivation happened?
Okay. Outside of a few isolated incidents, I did have
Uh-huh.
some of those. Probably around 2004 going into 2005. There were two things happening.
Uh-huh.
My parents were becoming unwell and they would subsequently pass. So
Yes.
I think that was one. I was not aware, but I think that was one of the triggers. Secondly, my youngest child, whom I adopted from Guatemala as a single mom. So if any of you are considering adoption, go, go, go. It's a wonderful thing.
What made you decide to adopt from Guatemala? How did, because I don't know how it works over there, but that sounds like, you know, it's such a lovely thing to do, but how did it even come about?
Actually, I read about the children in China when they had the one child rule. And I decided that was in college. And I decided that I was going to adopt one of the thrown out baby girls because they preferred boys.
Oh,
And even though I would have my own biological children, that just was something I decided. So when the time came, I had a daughter who was about 7.5.
mhm.
And I was a single mom. And I said, all right, I want to adopt now. One of my legal clients was a Chinese doctor who emigrated to the US, and he
Uh-huh.
helped translate the medical documentation for the orphans. And I signed up to get a special needs child because I happened to work with Rotary International with their Gift of Life program, which provides corrective heart procedures for children in need. I was really involved with that program on Long Island. I was the director of hosting. I increased the program from 20 children a year to 60 over 5 years.
Wow.
So they were so kind. I was named Woman of the Year. I did a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
read
work.
that in your notes. Yeah.
Yeah, I devoted a lot of time and effort. So anyway, I felt that, a special needs child, I might, especially cardiac, the child that would have no opportunity there could have here. And, but the children were severely, special needs, like, they weren't able to walk and things like that. And I didn't think I could take that on as a single mom. And the Chinese doctor said to me, my client, he guided me to a social worker that worked with attorneys that adopted from Guatemala. And I said, you know what? I just want a child in need, a daughter at that time. It doesn't matter where they come from. God's going to give me the child I'm supposed to have.
Hmm.
So it went like clockwork. I went over. I didn't go over there yet. They within 6 weeks of me hiring the attorneys, they had a referral for me. I
Oh.
accepted her on the spot, and 8.5 months later, I was bringing her home. I don't know if it's that case that way right now. Everything's a little different. Actually, I because I'm glutton for punishment. No, I'm very blessed. I have been approved to be a host for a 13-year-old girl coming from Colombia who's also in need of a family. So
Oh
there's
my goodness.
yeah, I've got one that's about 30, and she's a doctor in Boston. My other one just finished college, and I might try to start again with a 13-year-old, or at least host her for a month. So I had to go through the psych evaluation. So I am sane, even though I talk about,
Do you know
talking
what's
about this.
interesting about that as well? It's one thing to adopt a child, but a lot of people, oh, I want a certain child, this particular age. You go, I will take any child. Yes, it's a very interesting story, and I think it's what motivates you to keep doing this. Then is it you just like being a mum, or is it the humanitarian cause that goes alongside it as well? What's the
I
passion? Where's it coming from?
I like to help. Um,
Yeah.
at this point, I mean, I like to work from home,
Hmm.
like we're doing now. So I'm home a lot. I don't plan on traveling too much with my mediumship as far as, yeah, I teach in Lilydale, and I'm doing the physical mediumship up in Albany. I'm not going to be traveling like I used to different states. So I work from home, and I have a large enough home. I have the means to, you know,
Well,
help.
I think it's wonderful. Right, so let's go back to the story of because we have a habit of doing this on the Soul Sync of jumping all over the place, but this happens when you talk about spiritual subjects, I think. So take me back to the point where your spiritual, whatever you might want to call it, activation, awakening moment. When did this all start up again? You might say.
So as I said, it was starting around 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
That's when my youngest was about 2 going on 3. So a couple of things were happening. Number one, my parents were starting to fail. My dad passed in '06. My mom passed in '07. I was running my own law practice. I had the 2 girls. I had a bad back, and strange things were happening. First of all, I started picking up the emotions of other people, like a business partner from half a world away. I was on a cruise ship, and I picked up he was and I felt his anger, and I'm like, what's going on? And I couldn't validate that though till I got home a week and a half later, and he was able to validate it. He had witnessed a dog get killed, and he was very upset that afternoon. So he actually remembered the incident. And my daughter, my back would be bothering me. And one day she put her hand on my back. She was like 3. I take the pain away, she says. And would you believe after about 30 seconds, the pain went away.
Oh my
Now, I have a
goodness.
herniated disc from car accident. Wasn't just I overdid it cleaning or something. So that was happening. And I started reading books on the subject. Then my daughter, she'd be up in the middle of the night talking away. And I finally said to her, who are you talking to? Because I did have, the little monitor, but she'd be like, and she would find, she was just starting to form words. And she said, Sandy Angel and Glassy Angel, Sandy Man and Glassy Angel. And I'm like, where did she ever hear that? So I thought maybe Sandy Man was the Sandman, but that wasn't it. And I started, I don't know, a few weeks later, I was reading Doreen Virtue's book, which I know she's renounced her teachings, but I still find them viable. I think she just did that for her ultra-right Christian husband. So God bless her and their marriage. But I think her metaphysical writings are still on point. And apparently, Archangel Metronon has the most glass-like sheen of an aura of all the archangels, and according to her, and he always travels with
What's the author
Sandokan.
called again?
Beg pardon?
What was the author called again? The book you
Doreen
referenced?
Virtue.
I'm only asking because I'm writing it down myself because it sounds like a good read.
Her books are great. It's just that she's renounced all her teachings because she got recently remarried to an ultra conservative Christian who doesn't, who believes yoga is the work of the devil. So, however, I think if they divorce, she might decide her prior. She's a metaphysician.
So that's a very interesting story in itself. You'd think someone with that level of knowledge would have the equipment to realize the barometer.
You know what? We're here to have different experiences.
We are,
so
yes.
She believes is fine, but I do find that despite her renouncing her prior teachings, I find them valuable and they're easy reads. So for anyone that's starting out, they're gentle.
I'll have a look into that.
If you
I like little books. I used to steer away from little books, but actually I find myself, I actually get through it. A big, intimidating book.
So she did a lot of tarot cards with this guy, Randy Valentine. And they're very gentle, like the angel tarot cards. They it's not like the original ones with the hangman and the deaths. They're like angels and seasons. So
I do like that. Do you know what? We're going down another rabbit hole, but we'll go there. I love tarot cards, and I've got a few decks, and I went to a tarot group, and I've really struggled to learn them. My granddad was a really well-known tarot reader, and it's taken me a while to sort of get to grips because it is complicated at the start. You don't really know all the suits and this and that, and now I just go with my intuition and I look at them and they make me laugh. Some days they make me laugh because I'll do something stupid and then I pull out a card and I think, it's so funny. It's just like you couldn't make it up. They are very, very accurate because, well, I guess ultimately they're staring your own reality back at you, aren't they?
I'm not a professional tarot reader. I went right into mediumship.
Yeah, I like tarot cards because I think they're a good experiment. I found in the beginning when I was sort of trusting to learn my intuition, but we won't go down that tarot card rabbit hole anymore.
I like them. I actually took a course with the Young Center in Ireland online, and it was very interesting from the Jungian perspective on how to use the tarot in
Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise they did anything. Honestly, you're pointing me in all different resource directions now. So I was going to say, with where we kind of left off then. So your daughter gave you this, what can only be described as a miracle touch, which then heals you. Where did you go from there?
It was just one thing of many. It was knowing, feeling the business partner from a half a world away. It was all these things. I went to the craziest person I knew, my massage therapist who owned a home in Sedona and also lived in town. And she says to me, "You're an empath." I said, "I'm a what?" And I had no idea. I mean, I'd heard of empathy, but I had no idea there was a thing called an empath. So that was the first ability that unfolded with me. And I went to the library. I got some books out to read about it. I was directed to find spiritualist churches, which I did. We have a couple on Long Island. I think two of them are gone now. So I started going there and met some people, learned about, yes, you can talk to dead people. I didn't even know that was a thing. For some reason, the rule of vibration and
Yes.
for some reason, now I'm in my mid 30s, mind you, I never saw anything about John Edward, who lived like one town over. I never saw anything on TV with James Von Prague. I ended up becoming good friends with his sister before she passed, and she lived on one town over. But while I was not open to metaphysical things, I had no idea what a medium was. I didn't, as I said, and even though the stuff was on television, my first experience was that Bruce Willis movie where the little boy, I see dead people. And I was still kind of confused about that. So once I started getting into it and learning about it, I now have several thousand medium friends on Facebook talk about the law of attraction. It's just crazy. So I ended up going into this training at the Spiritualist churches. Then we have a place called the Omega Institute upstate. And Tony Stockwell, he's from your country.
Yes. He's very well known.
So I've been training with Tony for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years. He teaches, the first time he taught at Omega, I took that class, and he's great. And then Lilydale is the largest spiritualist community camp in the U.S., and I'll teach there during the summer. So
Just to ask on Tony Stockwell, what would you say are kind of the penny drop moments that maybe you've taken from him as a teacher? Is there sort of certain, because I found, I don't know if you found this or find this, I found that I am identifying the value in having different teachers, but I also think that you can have too many teachers and, put your power in other people. So when you stay with one person, I am starting to see the benefit of that myself. What do you feel that Tony Stockwell, what lasting impression and work do you do with him? I'm just trying to get an understanding of any lessons that we might be able to learn ourselves from your time with him, because he's very well known in this country.
I love Tony. He's very well received here. He's he's kind, he's gentle, although the first time I trained with him, he yelled at me. And at which point the rest of the students in the group turned around and yelled at him. And so but I really like Tony, and I like that he's a little bit more open-minded now in his path, because some of the, I've also trained with Mavis Spatilla.
Yes.
I love her. She actually showed up. I did a library. It was the first in person I'd done in a while. There's usually there was like over 100 people there. And she just popped in before the beginning of the demonstration part. With Tony, I do a lot of trance. That's how I ended up kind of going into physical mediumship. And Tony, his strength is his trance and his clairsentience. I like being exposed to different teachers.
That's interesting. So you have obviously been in this world now, the world of the spirit, for quite some time, and obviously learned a lot. I guess on reflection now, because a lot of people listen to this show who, myself included, who are trying to develop their mediumship. What, being the journey that you're on, would you give your younger self any advice to help you develop? I'm just trying to learn some of the lessons that you've learned along the way and pearls of wisdom that we might be able to take ourselves.
Well,
when trying to develop in one's mediumship.
I think when you start, whether things have been opening, or you want to investigate whether there is potential there to develop, because I always encourage people to try a good foundational class. I think you should train with a teacher. I know that there's a lot of people that feel that you should just train with spirit, and that's all well and good. However, for a brand new student who is still learning to discern, and I still get things wrong. I tell people this is not 100% accurate. There's nothing that's 100% accurate. Talk to any doctor, accountant, or barrister, right? The barrister can't tell you with 100% accuracy whether the case is going to result in a financial reward. You have to wait until they decree. So the same thing with mediumship. The energy of the sitter could throw something off for the reception, even if the medium is in good health. The medium doesn't sleep. They have a bad day. They're not on their top of their game. So there can be a number of factors. So understanding that, I think people that are starting out should get a good foundational course from an experienced teacher. And secondly, I think then there should be I think they should learn trance. And Tony is in agreement.
Why do you say that? 'Cause you're not the first person that said this to me, and I won't reference who has said this. I won't start telling names. But someone else said to me that trance is a really good thing to learn first of all. Why is that?
Because trance is all about getting comfortable with blending. And when you sit for trance, you're blending deeper or learning to blend deeper. You're getting out of the way. Versus when you're doing mental mediumship, you're receiving the information and then giving it. There's kind of a distance. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Do you know what? I sat in a trance circle for a few weeks online with a very nice guy. Do you know what? I will name it. I don't know why I'm holding back his name. He's been on the show. Called Nico, and he's a trance medium. And I must admit, it's the closest I've ever felt the spirit person. And I did feel them moving up to my voice box. I did feel that happening because I was like, I can't talk. But then what kept happening was my mind would get in the way as soon as I just couldn't get the first bit out. And I know why it was. It was ego based because I was worrying about what would come out and what would the group think. Was I good or not? And that, I identify that is the problem, of where I've got to. And I did say next time I go back, and it's just because I have a bit of a problem on a Wednesday. On a Wednesday, I've got the Spiritualist church or the trance circle or badminton. It's like all my groups and interests, they only meet on a Wednesday.
I'll be teaching Tuesday, but we got a 5-hour time difference, so that might be a problem.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think to people listening to this, because I would have assumed that trance was only, and this was my belief before I met Nico, I believe that trance was for advanced. So maybe like 3, 4, 5, you wouldn't even touch it until you could do the sit in front mediumship. You could understand why I've come to that conclusion.
That's the way it was perceived.
Yes.
And I mean, Tony actually agrees. He will say it. Trance is probably second. The first one is to get your basics and foundation. Learn how to center, connect with the spirit, step back a little bit, feel comfortable that way. Trance is enhancing the blend, going deeper. And what happens is when you study trance, whether you want to be a trance medium or whether you want to use trance as a basis of physical mediumship development, your evidence is going to get more detailed because you're allowing more of the spirit to blend. You're sitting more in the back seat.
Yeah, that does. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I guess I do wonder, is there would you, because I'd never come across a trance medium when I looked at mediums. Do normal members of the public want that kind of mediumship though? It might be a bit scary to a normal. I guess that the reason it's probably not in the public domain as much is because when you go and see a medium for the first time, it could look very scary to someone that isn't of I tend to think, is it more just I would want to go see a trance medium now because I'm in that world.
So honestly, I'm not one to really go into a trance during a reading with the general public, with client, unless it's a client that, like yourself, is an acting medium and has some basis in knowledge. I have done, I used to run a spiritualist service prior to COVID out of my office once a month. And I did a couple of sermons in trance, and that was open to whoever walked in the door. So that was an interesting experience. But I use it a lot because I sit in the cabinet every other week. I have a private physical mediumship development group, and I'm a transfiguration medium. And I'm also developing other physical phenomena. But I can't get my trumpet up. No, just kidding.
No, it's very look, I think all of we could go in so many different directions in this conversation because there's so much that I find trance absolutely fascinating, and some of the stories I hear from guests here about how the face of the sitting medium then becomes transformed. I've heard so many stories, and do you know what? I do want to see it. I do want to sit in front of because I've only ever done it through Zoom, and it's just not the same. It's just not, because you can't see on the camera if it's dark. It's. I
have actually. I have pictures. I don't know. I do a program online, a presentation for some of the public libraries that teaches about what physical mediumship is.
And you'll have to email me them, and I will. Okay. I will put them out on social media when this episode gets published, so people can actually see them. So if you're listening to this now and you want to see the pictures, just go to social media on Facebook, and they'll be on there. So one of
the things that happens with Transfig, because I had a grand time with this when I was teaching it up at Lilydale. I work with elementals. And again, if you'd asked me 20 years ago that, do fairies exist, I probably would have said to you, you lack the testamentary capacity to execute a legal and valid last will and testament. So one of the things they'll do is they will elongate my ear and then it bends over and it waves. Now, I'm always in the box. We have got pictures of me with the ear sticking out. I had to train my doctor because when I told him I did this, he was questioning my sanity. And I showed him a photo of it, and he said, yep, the physical ear does not bend that way, because my hand was nowhere near it. So I said, yep. So he kind of was like, okay, she's got something going on there.
Right. You've definitely got to send me this picture, because this one sounds like a really interesting one.
And, that's why I like the transfig. Because actually, I do get the faces of loved ones, etc. But when I was teaching in Lilydale, the energy is fabulous there, in case anybody wants to take a to-do list, but do it during the summer. My students, I was putting them in the cabinet, and twice, brand new students to trance and sitting in a cabinet, the ears elongated and it waved to us. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool looking. Cause I never see myself. I do get the picture, but not the waving. We haven't gotten video. We've only been able to take pictures with the camera. So, but I will send you some of my transfiguration photos, because that's what they're there for, is to share. But for those of you, not everybody likes to do physical. For those seeking to do evidential mediumship or just message mediumship, because I think both are important. I know there's a stigma that only evidential.
Yeah. I just want to move on lastly to ask you, because our time is coming to an end, and I just want to ask you about Charlie, your spirit team. One of the big things I think people want to have is a relationship with a guide or something like that. How would you, is there any advice you could give in regards to deepening your connection with your spirit team further for people that maybe, feel that they don't know who their team is, perhaps?
Sure. So, actually, I do a program on that.
Oh, of course you do. Of course, my intuition has just given me that question to ask you. There we go.
Spirit designed it because when I was sitting in the cabinet one night, I had invited a student at the time who was facing kidney surgery in the next day or so. And they said, invite her. And a new spirit guide came in. Now, my sitters are the normal sitters, and they know the cast of characters that come through. But this one looked very different. And I got up and I looked down. I could see I was wearing knee-high boots, but then I went out again. So anyway, this new guide that was stepping into the forefront, who helps me with my trance healing, he then proceeded to give me clues as to his identity. I got them in meditation. I had a couple of medium friends of mine call me that during their meditation, they had a vision of me. I was at an Eyes of Learning, which is a not-for-profit, the oldest not-for-profit metaphysical learning community on Long Island. That's where John Edwards got his start. I belong to them, and I'm an ambassador. And we were at the annual luncheon, and they saw this man walking around with me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to find out who he is. He came in and spoke through me. So there was all this information. I was going through the internet trying to find him. I was interviewed on a podcast, and Sandy Ingham, who's from your country. I don't know if you know Sandy. She's a psychic artist. Oh, she's wonderful. While she watched the interview, she went into trance and jotted. We worked together. She goes into trance and draws pictures, portraits. So usually she used to do deceased loved ones, but then she started to shift into guides. And as it turned out, I was eventually, after about 4 months of getting clues, I was about to give up. I'm sitting there. I'm like, you may not even be in the history books. I'm trying to Google stuff. And he said, I wrote a book. Oh, I wrote 3 books, and there was a book written about me. And it was like, after he said that, all of a sudden I found it. The image matched the cursory, drawing that Sandy did that time. All the information he had given me over the 4 months, plus I was getting from other mediums, matched his actual persona. That's why it was the basis of this, because old school teaching was you have to know your guides through meditation. Well, not necessarily. You could go to a medium that can bring through guides. And then if you get another reading somewhere that can validate it, you can connect with them in meditation. I do encourage that, but not a lot of people, some people can't meditate very well. You could get a spirit portrait done. There are mediums out there that,
Do you know what? I like your, I could tell you're a lawyer for a living. I like your evidence-based approach. I think it's, I like it. I like the way you piece together the bits of the jigsaw puzzle. You're a natural investigator. I can see that.
Well, this is the intuitive world. So
yes,
get a little over dramatic and think, everything is have you ever seen the ones that are too ungrounded? As I said, I'm spiritualist in my approach, a grounded approach. But so we have a minute. I want to just share with your folks. So one way to get to know your guides, quiet your mind. If you can do a 15-minute meditation to quiet yourself down, that would be fabulous. Then take some time and just focus on you and your energy and how you feel. Then ask one of your guides, your gatekeeper, right? Your protector guide, to step into your energy. That's the only one that will step in. You have to give permission. You won't get random spirits, okay? And as they step in, notice
the gatekeeper guide.
Yes. Gatekeeper is one term. Protector guide is another term. But ask them to step in and notice any differences. You might all of a sudden feel heavier. You may lose feeling in your legs. Then ask them to gently step back, and they will. Don't worry. And then notice any changes. Okay. Repeat that exercise. And you have a couple of guides. So you can also use the same exercise with grandma who's up in spirit. Ask grandma to step in. Ask grandma to step out. The only one who's going to step in is the one you invite. So don't be afraid that some random spirit is going to step in. That just doesn't happen. Then if you're like me, a little crazy, even though I'm probably the only certified sane, I have paperwork saying I'm certified sane because I adopted my daughter and I had to prove I was sane in order to adopt. And I just passed another psycho,
we think you're sane here. We don't need your credentials or paperwork, Winter. Okay. I promise you.
So the other thing I have fun with you, it's more of a psychic level or your empath level. When I go to the zoo particularly, I love to blend with the animals. I have a very natural, curious demeanor about me. So Spirit has sent me to blend with certain animals. One time they said, go to the birds of prey. So I did. And when I got there, they told me to blend with the snowy owl. So I did. Now, maybe not do it in broad public with all these people, but, hey, my cousin climbed Mount Everest a couple times. It runs in the family. We do daring things. So I start blending with this owl. Now, if you recall the beginning of the show, I talked about my neck. I have limited range of motion from a car accident. Well, I was almost like full on blended with the snowy owl. I was the owl was me. And I forgot, but owls can turn their heads 180 degrees. And the owl turned its head 180 degrees. My neck cracked. I had greater range of motion for the rest of the afternoon than I had had in years since the car accident.
Oh my goodness.
My mediumship students, because I wrote about it on Facebook, they were cracking up. They said, you found a new chiropractor at the Bronx Zoo. I said, yep.
I bet they were cracking up. There's a pun there, isn't there? Well, listen, Winter,
with this stuff.
Do you know what? It's been such an action-packed hour. I think we've talked about, well, it hasn't quite been an hour, but do you know what? We've talked about a lot. We've crammed a lot in, and I could speak to you for a whole lot longer. And if people do want to find out more about you, you obviously go to show notes where you'll find more details about Winter. But lastly, that leaves me to say thank you for coming on. It's been a delight.
Thank you for having me. And thank you, everyone who's taken the time to watch the podcast. Continue watching this man. He's hysterical. Just sweet as can be. So I appreciate coming on.
But there we go. That was my conversation with Winter Brook. Do let me know what you thought of the episode. Do go over to YouTube. Leave me a comment if you want to. If you want to get involved with the show, you might have a guest suggestion. Some of it you want on, or you might even want to be a guest yourself. You can always email me. All the details are in the show notes. That's it for this week's edition of The Soul Sync. Much love. I'm going to go cool down. It's so hot outside. I hope you all have an amazing week. Goodbye.